Hi, this is Mrs. Hall, and in this lesson I'd like to talk to you a little bit about stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Now these are three concepts that I'm sure you think that you're very knowledgeable about, and I'm sure that you do have some experience with these concepts. However, I would like to teach you a little bit more from a psychological standpoint about what these different concepts are and how they affect us in our everyday lives. I'd like to start with the term cognitive schemas, because this is where all of these concepts of stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, they all originate from our cognitive schemas. Now, schemas are categories of information that we hold in our mind. It's a framework for organizing information in our mind. We have cognitive schemas, we have social schemas, and what we're talking about in this lesson here are social schemas. So these are categories of social events and people that we have. This helps us to simplify our social world. Now, the most well-known type of social schema that we have is what you know as a stereotype. Stereotypes are the overgeneralizations that we have about the characteristics of a specific group. If you look at the map that I've put on here, this really is how the average American sees the world, if you think about it. We judge people based on the stereotypes that we have. This is a very normal process. There's not anything wrong with doing this until it becomes something that we lose the uniqueness of individuals. When we're meeting someone for the first time, it's very normal to stereotype them. When you hear that they go to a particular high school, we place judgment. We judge the different schools. We judge universities. We judge states that people come from. We judge athletic teams that a person is a part of, different social groups that a person is a part of. But you and I both know that we also judge people based on the race that they are, and we do that without even talking to a person. We look at the color of someone's skin, we make a judgment, and we stereotype that person. And what happens is that we overgeneralize those characteristics and we apply them to the individual, and we believe that every individual who's a part of a particular group has the exact same characteristics that we believe the entire group has, and that's where stereotypes can become a problem. As I've mentioned, it's an automatic, normal, cognitive process for us to stereotype like this. And what I want you to understand is that stereotypes can be both positive and negative. Obviously, the picture on the left is a negative stereotype that we have of the Muslim community or anyone who's of a Middle Eastern descent. But if you look on the right-hand side in that picture, we look at Asians as being more intelligent than other races. That's a positive stereotype, but what we have to understand is that positive or negative, oftentimes our stereotypes are inaccurate, especially when applying them to individuals. Yes, we can look at the group as a whole and we can see that there are a number of Asians who do excel in particular academic areas, but that doesn't mean that every individual Asian is the brightest kid in the class. So we have to be very careful when applying these stereotypes to individuals. What happens when we have a negative stereotype, especially, is that that negative stereotype can lead to prejudice and ultimately to discrimination. So let's talk about what prejudice is. Prejudice is a negative attitude. Now remember, attitudes are just cognitive. They're just the ideas and the thoughts that we have. It's our particular evaluation of a specific group, of an event, whatever it is. It's our opinion that we hold. Now when it comes to prejudice, we're talking about a negative opinion that we hold toward a particular group. So the stereotype about Asians being more intelligent, that would not be a prejudice because that's not a negative attitude. We have to be looking at things that we view negatively. Here are some pictures that I've found of some various prejudices that we often hold in our society. We look at the elderly as being useless, perhaps, as being not good drivers, maybe, as being incapable of doing things that younger people can do. On the bottom, we do have a prejudice against women still, and we view women in a more negative or tainted light than we view men a lot of times. Now, obviously, that picture is a little bit obnoxious. It's a little more subtle today in our prejudice against women. If you look on the right at the top, we have a view, adults especially have a view of teenagers as being irresponsible and risky and that sort of thing. And we look at the bottom picture on the right, and we have a view of parents always telling us what to do or nagging us or getting on our case about whatever. So we all have these negative attitudes that we hold toward various groups of people. And I'm sure you can think of a lot more than just the ones that I've listed here. What are some of the causes of prejudice? Well, first of all, we've got to understand the idea of in-group and out-group. In-group is the people that we associate with. If we're talking about a racial in-group, we're talking about the people who share the common characteristics of our race. If we're talking about the school we go to, then we'd be talking about the in-group of Mona Shore's students. If we're talking about the in-group of a team, okay, we'd be talking about our particular team that we're a part of. The out-group is anybody else. Anybody else who is not a part of our in-group, not a part of who we associate with. And so what can happen with prejudice is we can exaggerate the differences between the in-group and the out-group. And we can look at the others, the out-group, as being so much different than we are, and we don't see enough of our commonalities to understand that we're all humans and that we all do share some common characteristics. Another cause of prejudice would be social learning. If you remember Albert Bandura and his social learning theory, that we learn behaviors by watching other people perform those behaviors. And what we can do is we can imitate the attitudes that we see modeled by others. Now, I know that attitudes are cognitive, but our behaviors will sometimes reflect our attitudes. And so we will imitate the attitude that maybe our parents have toward a particular group, maybe our coaches have toward a particular group, maybe that our peers have toward a particular group. And then we imitate those attitudes, and then we form the attitude, the prejudice, within our own minds. And then what can also happen is that when we do imitate those attitudes, we're reinforced for it. We fit in more with our group. When we imitate the attitudes that are being modeled, we then fit in even more, and we're reinforced for those things. A third possible cause of prejudice is just the idea that victims feel the need to exert their power over others. A lot of times when people feel powerless, they will look for ways that are often inappropriate, not the best ways, to exert that little bit of power that they might feel like they could have left. This might not be the biggest cause of prejudice, but it is certainly one that does play a role in the prejudices that we have and that have developed and have continued over time. A couple of quotes that I've got here for you about prejudice and then leading into discrimination. The main reason why stereotypes and prejudice exist is because we tend to exaggerate the differences between groups and minimize the difference within groups. So the stereotypes we talked about, that we judge an individual based on the group membership that they have, and that we don't look at the differences that exist between members of the same group. Don't talk about me until you've talked to me. Don't underestimate me until you challenge me. Don't judge me until you know me. And that's just so important, because we do need to get to know the individual and not just view the individual as a part of this bigger group, because we each have unique characteristics. And just because I'm a mom or I'm a teacher or I'm a female doesn't mean that I have all the characteristics that all those other groups have. A fourth reason that prejudice may exist is the need for a scapegoat. Now, a scapegoat is someone that we blame for the problems in our society. And what happens is a scapegoat is someone or a group that's often too weak to defend themselves. So we put all the problems of our society on this group, and they often stand out as different from the majority of people. And so because we don't want to take any responsibility on ourselves, we put that responsibility, or we put the blame for the problems that we have onto a particular group of people. So maybe it's Muslims, and we use them as a scapegoat for the problems that we have. Maybe it's in the past, and maybe still even today, it's African Americans, and we blame them for the problems. If we could just take care of the problem of this particular race or this particular group, then all of our problems would go away. So that causes us to view those people in a more negative light. Finally, discrimination. How is discrimination different from a stereotype and from prejudice? Well, this is the actual behavior. Discrimination always stems from prejudice, and prejudice is the negatively held attitude, the cognitive portion of the discrimination. Prejudice in and of itself is not wrong because we're not doing anything. There's no behavior involved. It's just an opinion, a view, a thought. But as soon as we start to behave on that prejudice, then we've got a problem. Then we're discriminating. Discrimination is a negative behavior that we perform toward an individual due to that person's group affiliation. So when we say derogatory things toward a person because he's from a different school, this particular athletic team, or because he's of this sexual orientation, and we have an attitude about this sexual orientation, then we are discriminating against that individual. And that always results from our prejudice. Bullying is an act of discrimination that's based on our prejudices toward individuals. So that takes us through our lesson on stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. And then we're going to be working with these things, and we're going to be talking more about this and how we can overcome prejudice and discrimination in our daily lives and hopefully make a change in our society. As always, if you have questions, make sure you email me or ask me in class. You have a great day.